5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
E3 Studios in Sunset Hills, Missouri. State-of-the-art equipment in a lounge-like atmosphere, where the podcasters come to play. Find us at e3podcaststudio.com. Record differently.
All right, in E3 Studio today, we have none other than a buddy of mine, Zach Sharkey. How you doing, Zach?
Good. How you doing, Chris?
Fantastic. So Zach Sharkey is the principal of Gateway Valuation Consulting. He's an expert in that field. It's why the Blue Collar Broker recommends him as the only valuation consulting firm. He's also written a book, Business Valuation for Business Owners. And we're going to get into some business brokerage content today. We're going to call this Episode 1, M&A The Right Way. How's that sound, Zach?
Love it. Sounds great.
Awesome. So, one statistic I've seen recently, Zach, and I want to know your take on it. We're obviously going to give them some content today in different areas, but the IBBA says that only 1 in 10 businesses are changing hands. Why do you feel that's the statistic, which is not a good one, by the way?
I think it could be a few reasons. One, it's who's representing them and the prices. If you're talking about the lower market companies, we'll say under $5 million, you have business brokers who are promising multiples or numbers that are just unrealistic. And when you have buyers, and I do work for this, for potential acquirers, we do the valuations, and the numbers aren't even close to what the asking price is. It doesn't make any economic sense to acquire them, so they move on to another one. So they're not selling.
They're just not selling, right? It's a bad deal out there, right? So 90% of all people who begin the search to buy a business never complete the transaction. And what Zach just mentioned, that's one of the big reasons why, right? But right now, statistically, there's 15 prospective buyers on the market for every one business listed for sale, which seems to be a lot of buyers. But at the end of the day, the price needs to be worth the squeeze. So only 20% of all businesses listed for sale ever sell, right? And so that's one of the things we're going to get into today. So we got a few reasons for that, and we're going to blow through these reasons to get to the meat of this today, which is going to be on valuation and price and why that is important. So reason number one, most people have never bought a business before, Zach, right? So
Yep.
First of all, a lot of people want to be business owners. To me, it's the second thing they want to do next to being a homeowner. For some reason, everyone equates this to be the American dream, right? So most people never bought a business before. What do you see? Because I know you get people that come to you prematurely, right? You get a referral when they're not even ready. So kind of explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, the people I get a lot, they're frustrated with their jobs. It could be a couple of reasons. They're frustrated with their jobs. They're sick of working for somebody. They don't see any long-term growth of where they're at. Another one could be someone who just got laid off and has a lot of capital. They think it's sexy of having their own company. They don't. Most of them don't realize the work they have to put in to get where they need to be successful, to actually regain the paycheck they lost. It takes years of work that they just don't see, because you see social media a lot. They glamorize this
Entrepreneur.
yeah. And it's not like that.
No, you're right. And a lot of people have never been a manager before, right? They've never been a leader before, and it's tough. When I learned this the other day, I'm going to riff on this. So my buddy Kevin McCullough that owns Float STL, St. Louis, great guy. He's my mindfulness coach is what I'll call him, right? He helps me get that work-life balance deal down. And I was talking to him about all these businesses that my brother and John Moriarty, all of us working together to scale all these different entities. And I'm trying to put in strategic objectives and principles and basically a book of what this business is going to be. And it's difficult because, one, I'm not analytical, obviously, and two, it's just tough. And Kevin goes, he goes, it's the difference between being the chef and knowing all the recipes you cook versus putting it into a book for anybody to read and know how to get that same outcome from whatever it is you're trying to cook, which is kind of genius, and I was glad I'm not the only one that struggles with that. But yeah, seeing a business, working for one and owning one, two different things. But here's an interesting tidbit. 50% of all transactions agreed to between the buyer and the seller fall apart during the due diligence stage and never close. What do you equate some of that to, Zach?
Yes, yeah, that's very important. A lot of that, and this is where they say time kills all deals, and that's very true. A lot of it could be once you say you have something. Say if you're the seller, and here's my business, here's what I have. You haven't really opened the books, and then the LOI comes, letter of intent comes in, and they start looking at everything, and it's not as pretty as they saw. So then they start renegotiating the price, and that's usually when it falls apart.
Yeah, I mean it's tough seeing the actual meat of the business. Another quick statistic that's interesting is business brokers are only involved in 10% of all deals. And looking at the way a lot of these are being listed, not surprising. Am I right, Zach?
That's correct.
Yeah, we're going to get into more of that here in a bit. Reason number 2, we're going to give you top 3 reasons here. Reason number 2, determining the right business is difficult for most people. And let's relate this. I know we were talking before we got on air about franchises, and this is another reason why, even though I have access to 300 to sell with my company, why I don't tend to go the franchise route is most franchise brokers try to sell something they know and something they've sold before, right? So if they sold a Subway, that's the first thing. Hey, do you like sandwiches, Zach? Yeah, we all like to eat. They try selling them a Subway. It's a pretty descriptive model. You got to get a lot of information from somebody to understand what they would be good at, right? Everybody wants to own something that creates cash, right? But I wouldn't be fit to be a mechanic, right? I've never changed my own oil. So, buying a Jiffy Lube or something like that wouldn't be good. That's another thing I think business brokers struggle with is, yes, you have a menu of listings to sell, all different businesses, right? You might have a winery. You might have an IT firm. But determining the right business is what I think separates good business brokers from the latter, right? I mean, many things, but one is truly helping somebody figure out where they need to be, not just selling them what they have.
And it's huge. And onto that, one of the things that a lot of people say is that, you've heard run with your passion, go with your passion. I'm passionate about dog treats, okay? So they'll go to a business broker or a franchise especially, and they'll, okay, I want to get in the dog treat business. The problem is they might love dog treats, but owning a company that sells dog treats, you're going to be doing management. You're going to be doing payroll. You're going to be doing tax. You're going to be doing accounting. They hate that stuff.
Right.
They want nothing to do with that. All they want to do is sell dog treats. But the problem is that's not what they themselves are doing.
Right.
Because they're running a business. They're not selling dog treats. Yes, the company does, but they work inside that company, and then it becomes just a burnout phase.
Right. That's it. I mean, that's the thing is you got to know, again, it's the difference between being the chef and cooking it versus trying to run the book of recipes. It's very important. So we're going to jump into the reason number 3, the most important reason that I want to talk about and why Zach Sharkey's here today to talk about his expertise and why he does what he does so well is valuation. And if you ask me, from my experience as a business broker, why most deals never close and why most people don't even get towards due diligence is because the asking price is gross. And what I see out there on the market is 2 + 2 = 18 as opposed to 4. And anybody that's looking for a business that has proper representation or even an MBA or any background in numbers and sees the math on these deals, it's why these listings are sitting for 24 and 36 months at a time. So, Zach, I know you got a lot to talk about in this valuation piece. Let's start breaking it down.
Sure. All right. So I kind of want to go to the first one is the people that are, and going back to Chris in terms of these prices being grossly overvalued, is that you have options, and most of them really aren't very good. A lot of these business brokers are using rules of thumb, or they're not calculating the number right. So, for example, one of the more popular business broker formulas is seller's discretionary earnings. And what they'll do is they'll take out the earnings, and then they won't add it back, or they'll add back just a portion of it. So it inflates the multiple of the number, and they're just not going to sell. And in this world, in the world I'm in, the valuation world, the barriers to entry are very, very low. The designations can be as simple as 1 week and almost 100% pass rate, as Chris knows.
Yes.
We know of people. There's also a lot of CPA firms, and I'm a CPA myself, but I wouldn't say that's where I learned valuation from at all. It's CPA's accounting. And if it was just the CPA alone, I would be in trouble because I couldn't do what I do. But you have a lot of CPA firms who will go off and do these credentials and then hold themselves out as valuation experts.
So let's go over your credentials quickly while we're talking on them that are on your business card, because you got quite a few of them. I know that's why me and you met, because I kept seeing where I believe deals weren't not just falling apart, not even making it to the table for a sit down, is because they're grossly overpriced. And the one thing that Zach and myself came together on is we're firm believers of experts staying in their lane, right? And so what we mean is, from getting a listing to reverse engineering the taxes and all that stuff where a CFO role needs to be held, all the way to due diligence with the right attorney, and all the way to a certified valuation. And that's where Zach comes into the play for the bluecollarbroker.com from Gateway Valuation Consulting. Explain to us what those all those letters are behind your name.
Sure. I try not to be alphabet soup on these, so they're really selective. The first is a CFA charter, and you have to use CFA as an adjective. It's just the CFA Institute's kind of quirky like that. That's by far the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than my master's, by far harder than the CPA or anything else. That one's a global designation, minimum 3 years. As of 2002 to 2012, the 10-year start to finish pass rate was 14%. And again, it's all over the globe. You get one chance a year. It's excruciating, but that's how you learn this stuff. That's how you learn econ finance. People who work in investment management, who put together mutual funds that people buy, they're CFA charter holders. So that's really the one, say, when I covet, but that's the one that's taught me the most and gives me the ability to do what I do.
Sure.
I also have, and that's the top of finance. It's just the top in the finance world. And then there is accounting. Accounting is important to know, and that's why I have the CPA. I got that afterwards. The third one is the ABV, and that's accredited in business valuation. That's through the AICPA. And there's 3 business valuation credentials. You have to have one to do this work, or you should have one, I should say. There's one that's the ASA, which is a very good designation. The second one, the one I have, is the ABV. You have to be a CPA to get that one. It's also they're partnered with the ASA, so they have joint education waivers. And then there's a third, that's the 1 week and almost 100% pass rate. That's a CVA.
And it's important to know this stuff, right? Because these deals, regardless of what kind of company it is and who's representing it, it all comes down to numbers, right? And to me, that's where all these deals are getting hung up. You can't run it through some quick software, come out with a price to agree upon between the broker and the one wanting to list the business, and turning around and thinking people are going to give you what you're asking for, because it all falls apart once they ask for those financials. Financials don't lie. So let's get into some of these procedures here with valuations that you wanted to go over. I know you got some stuff with tax laws and various other things you wanted to make a point on.
Yeah, if I can, this is more, I think, more value add to what's going on today.
Yeah.
So a lot of deals, they would say, you've heard the 5 to 6 time EBITDA, like this industry, manufacturing, 5 to 6 times EBITDA. Okay, that's what it's been. We've had a regime change, and that's kind of the term for it, with the new tax laws that have happened. And it depends on how you're structured. If you're a pass-through entity, you get another, it's called a 20% QBI deduction. So you can deduct another 20% off your taxes, which it lowers your taxable amount, so you pay less tax, higher cash flow. What does that do on your value? It raises it. So what would that do if you took today with the new tax law with the 20% pass-through? If again, this is a non-C corp, so a pass-through entity. If you compared it to yesterday and that 5 to 6 multiple, it doesn't make sense. And people who are still using that, again, it's not going to make sense. So you really need to be cognizant of that.
But doesn't it come down to, well, Zach, it's always been done this way.
And I hear that all the time.
Right.
Oh, gosh.
And it does. And you can do this all you want and have a menu of listings that will sit and never sell. It's very important to understand this, and this is why, we reached out to Zach because he is an expert. And so, we need to make sure that every point of a sale, from getting the listing, the reverse engineering, as I said, all the way to valuation, is done proper and correct in order to convey a business in a good amount of time. And so that's why Zach's here today. Keep going.
Yeah, also, just kind of on that point, that sunsets in 2025, and this is for the pass-through entities, and it's very specific to the actual owner itself, because it's a pass-through entity, and I don't want to get too into the accounting stuff, but a pass-through entity, you're taxed at, like, so an LLC, S corp, limited partnership, you're taxed at the personal rate. That's where you get the 20% deduction, not the business itself, because it all flows through. And there are some subjectivities. It's half of your W-2 and some different rules that apply, but overall you still get that 20% deduction if it's a non-service-based firm. The other point I want to make about this, for manufacturing firms or for firms that are industries that are capital intensive, you get the bonus appreciation that expires. It starts to sunset in, I believe that's 2025. So we've run out our models of 2028. Most business valuation firms are going to do a 5-year model. Well, that's not going to capture the full amount. So you're going to overpay. If you're using that accelerated depreciation just for the next 5 years, it's going to show a really high cash flow company. And it's going to be way overpriced when you consider that it's going to expire at some point. And at some point, that's going to come to roost.
Sure.
And that model won't make sense then. So we've taken it to 2028. And we're modeling out the whole way because we want to capture the realistic, what the picture looks like over the long term, not just the 5 years. And here's your valuation report. Give me your money.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the way Zach does it, can you get a valuation a lot of places? Sure can. But again, it comes down to you get what you paid for, right? Keep going, Zach. I know you got some meat here today.
Yeah, I guess some of the other ones, I'm not a big fan of EBITDA. You probably know that. It's in my book. It's not the same as cash flow. You can't pay bills with EBITDA. And the reason why I hear a lot of business owners say, and especially because I do a lot of valuation for manufacturing wholesale distribution, where depreciation is such a big thing. And it's not a tangible thing. You can use it to compare similar industries when you're comparing multiples. But when you say, we sell for 5 to 6 EBITDA, I just want to give you an example on this. So if you have a $5 million deal, a 1% difference in that is $50,000. So when you say 5 to 6 on that number, there's a huge, 5.1, 5.2, 5. That's all very, very big. So you need to know the free cash flow of it. And free cash flow is an economic term. And the best thing I can relate it to is Enron. Enron used accounting. And that's why they failed, is they use accounting manipulation. EBITDA is all based on accounting, accrual-based accounting. Free cash flow is based on cash. Again, you pay bills with cash, not with EBITDA. You don't pay your bills with accrual accounting, and that's why I'm not a big fan of that. And it's a lot of business brokers will use it, and they'll say, again, 5 to 6 times. For one, that won't make sense because we have a new tax law. 2, that won't make sense because it's flawed in how it's built.
Right. I mean, then again, it goes back to that. It's always been done this way, and that's why Gateway Valuation Consulting is staying ahead of the curve, which is very important. Looking at the dynamic coming up, right? We have the baby boomer generation, and all these businesses potentially can change hands. But if it's being done the way we've been seeing it go, a lot of these aren't. A lot of them are going to fail because they don't understand what they need to be looking at when they come to succession planning.
In terms of, I guess, the last thing I'll get to here are rules of thumb. So rules of thumb, you're probably familiar with those as well. Again, going back 5, I don't want to keep using the EBITDA. It could be also seller's discretionary earnings. It could be, one-time sales, whatever it is. I don't want to discount them entirely because they can be used as sanity checks. They are good to say, okay, am I paying too much for this company? Am I getting hosed on it essentially? So they are good for that. But the thing is, every company, every business owner says, I'm different. My business is different. I hear that a lot, especially in the valuation world. Well, it's going to be hard for you to value me because I'm different. I'm like, yeah, that's what everyone says, It's
the same thing with my kid learned how to walk in this home. It doesn't make it worth any more than what the market's willing to bear.
Right,
yes.
Right. They're always different. You need to get that value in terms of, if you are different, then a rule of thumb doesn't apply to you. I mean, it will industry-wise, but if you're going to say rules of thumb apply, well, if you're different, how does that apply? Because that's a rule of thumb that should apply to everyone, but you're different. So that's why valuation is so important to capture what we call goodwill, to capture what that intangible value is that you have built. Is it something that you're a part of? If it's something that you're a part of, you probably want to get it out if you're looking to sell, because a potential buyer they're not buying you, they're buying the business.
Right.
And that's another concept we can go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things when you work your whole life to build a business, right? Right now, failure rate is over 88% on businesses in the first 3 years. So if you've got a business and you've got through and over that hump and you're looking to retire, this is why, and I get a lot of people balk at certain valuation prices and they look for the cheapest one. This is not the time to go cheap. This is the 30 years you've put into this business, and you're getting ready to retire. And maybe it is different to you, but you should get that different price, if you will, which means have somebody come in with a fine-tooth comb and get you the best asking price, not just pay, $2,000 for a valuation, let somebody run it through some software and just give you some ballpark numbers, because it's never going to happen. And then what happens when you list this, like we're seeing right now with certain brokers that are sitting on listings for 2 years, 3 years. Now, the market, again, can be tough, but to me, if all the stars are aligned, the reverse engineering, right brokers, listed the right way, certified valuation is correct, everything's agreed upon, it makes it attractive. And I get emails, probably 25 to 48 a week, of people ready to buy, but it's hard to get them a listing where it checks all these marks. And that's where Zach comes into play. Zach, let's talk about your book a little bit, right? So you wrote a book. Tell us about this book.
Sure. That was, it's Business Valuation for Business Owners. And I'll kind of give you a story of how it came to be. I
Sure.
didn't go out set the, hey, I want to write a book. It was published in 2016. I at that time was heading up or in charge of a valuation department for a large company. And I got the same questions over and over and over. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can find the answers online, because you can't answer the same question over, and it just gets repetitive. And I also saw the same pitfalls with this company, because it was a trust company. A lot of the families, just the businesses going to nothing. Usually it's second generational family businesses and
Sure.
just not transitioning well. And I'm like, there has to be something out there that speaks to them. Everything that was available was written to people like me, a practitioner, but it's boring. I mean, it's boring stuff. You're not going to pick up a McKinsey book and just start reading it, right?
Right.
It's not interesting stuff if you're not
Unless
into it.
Harry Potter starts talking about numbers, no one's going to get involved.
It's very technical. So what I did is, like, you know what? There is absolutely nothing out there. And my goal at first was to create a guide, just a reference book for these guys, because they needed help. And there wasn't one. So I'm like, that's where that's the whole genesis behind the book is, let me explain the process. This is what business valuation is. This is how, these are the people that do it. Kind of give you an idea of how to get the best bang for your buck. That's a chapter within there. Also go through the processes that we use, so a business owner knows what's going on as they're reviewing their valuation. It's not a book that tells you how to do a valuation. That is not the intent. The intent is and it's written to business owners specifically. I had it with the mind that I'm writing to a business owner, to one of my customers. And at the end, it also shows, it talks a lot about buy-sell agreements and a lot of pitfalls that are in, I would say 90+% of buy-sell agreements, where I've seen companies at least hundreds of companies fail or have severe problems. We could talk stories on that, on some of the family problems I've seen.
Sure.
But a lot of companies just going out of business, or brother, sister don't talk to each other anymore, just because they didn't shore that up. They were cheap. They were cheap, and they didn't want to think about mortality. They didn't want to think about things other than mortality, like disability.
Right.
So they don't plan for those things.
So the book is Business Valuation for Business Owners. I know that you can find it on Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anywhere else, Zach?
Nope, Amazon.com.
Where
Kindle.
everyone buys books.
Yep. That's the best place, Kindle and print.
Sure. It was funny the other day, because all the M&A that we do here, Amazon sent me a thing the other day, a little reminder you might be interested in, and it was your book. And I'm
really?
like, yeah, thanks, Amazon. I got it. So Zach Sharkey, principal of Gateway Valuation Consulting, where can people find you?
You can go to gatewayvalue.com.
Awesome. And then also he'll be listed on thebluecollarbroker.com. Go to the service tab, click on valuation. It will also take you straight to Zach Sharkey and Gateway Valuation to get that done for you. Well, I appreciate you coming out today, Zach, and educating the audience.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. So that has been episode 1 of M&A The Right Way.
This has been another E3 Studios production. To take your brand to the next level, visit us online at e3podcaststudio.com.